welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a leather bound journal like this with a long stitch binding with this little link variation on the ends. And these journals are nice because they will lay completely flat and they don't require any glue. Because they are leather and they're a little thick, they need a little bit of time before the cover will stay completely shut, but as the leather gets used to being in the shape, they will get there. So that's what we're looking at. Let's get started. For this tutorial, you will need your paper that has been folded and has holes punched, ready to sew into your cover. You will need scissors, a sewing needle, and your wax thread. If you do not have a cover or your pages prepped, check out my other tutorials and I will help you get to that point. So here we go. The first thing we're gonna do is turn our cover sideways and make sure our holes are gonna line up. If you punched your holes like top to bottom, you wanna make sure it matches up and we're not flipping things, because it will help your pages line up better if you keep it the right way. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our first signature, and from the very middle, we are going to pull that thread all the way through until you've got a little tail hanging off. That much is sufficient. It can be a little shorter, but you don't want it much longer. I'm gonna take my needle and go through this very first bottom hole on my cover. Because of the way these books are sewn, it doesn't really matter if you start on this top end or this bottom end, as long as you're starting on an end. And now I'm just gonna pull this all the way tight, being careful not to pull the tail through. The next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna flip this over to the back, and I'm gonna take my needle and I'm gonna go right back through this very same hole, both on the cover and in the signature. Now here's the one little tricky spot on this technique, is that if I pull this all the way, I'm sure you know, this will just pull all the way out. So the trick here is to pull it so you leave a little loop. And we're gonna come back in the next step and fix that so that it lays flat and you don't have this weird loop hanging out. But for now, that's where we're at. So, weird loop on the back. And then the next thing we're gonna do is go in and out the cover and signature holes, making sure everything lines up all the way to the other end. And like I said before, because this book is sewn back and forth and it's symmetrical, it doesn't matter if you start on the bottom of the book or the top of the book, it's all gonna even out at the end. So I'm gonna pull this through. Again, just be careful not to pull it too tight that you pull that all the way out. And then I'm gonna go through the next hole in the cover and flip it over and match it up to the hole on the signature. If you get to the point where you can make it through both holes at once, that is awesome. I've never been very good at that. So from here, we're gonna just try and pull this as tight as we can. Like I said, we're gonna come back and pull that tight, so it's not a huge deal if it's not the most secure right now. And we're just gonna continue on to the next holes. Oops. Alright, and then on to the next hole, through the signature, pull that all nice and snug, and through the last one on this side. All right, once you get to this point, I'm just gonna give that a little tug and a little tug down here so that is flat. I'm gonna take my needle and go through the very next hole and then get my next signature and start going back the other way with this. When you're sewing these, make sure to get the very middle of every signature too, otherwise you're gonna have loose pages falling out. So I've got that nice and secure. I'm gonna keep going to the next hole. And you're just gonna weave your way in and out the whole way. At this point, you should be able to pull the thread pretty tight without fear of getting your loop pulled through. All right, and then with this last hole, we're gonna go through the signature. Find it, through the cover. Oh no. Also, you can see here, I totally missed the right hole, so I'm gonna go backtrack that and fix it. From this point, you're gonna take your needle and thread it through this loop and pull it through. So then I'm going to flip this over, go back to where the tail is hanging out on the inside and gently pull that tight. You don't want to pull that knot through, but if you do, it's okay. You can just tug it from the back again and it'll pull it back out. I'm gonna adjust my thread so it's tight here. When I get to that point, I'm just gonna flip it over, pull it through this way, and we're now tight throughout. So here's where we're at on the back. That has been looped, and then I'm just gonna put my needle in to the next hole on the cover and repeat the process. Adding in another signature. There you go, and you got a nice little link right there. Again, as you pull things snug, just be gentle so you don't accidentally tear through the paper. And then once we get through that last hole on the back, I'm gonna take this, loop it under that previous stitch, pull it through so we have a nice little link, and then I'm gonna go through the next hole. And you're gonna repeat that process every time. So I'm gonna go all the way down, and then when I get to this end, I'm gonna link through this hole right here, and then move into the next hole on the cover. And you're just gonna keep going back and forth the whole time. All right, here we are again on the bottom. So we're gonna take this, loop it through that previous one, pull it tight, and then go back through here and go back up to the top. When you get to the last signature, we're just going to keep doing things as we've been doing. There's not really anything too special about sewing this one in. And when we get to the end, we will finish it off and tie all these threads so that they don't come undone. This is another style journal where, because your stitching is showing, it gives you another space to be creative and artistic with it. You can punch your holes wherever you want. So instead of doing just these two long ones with a link, you could add another section in the middle. You could make these shorter. Whatever fits your preference. You can also get different color threads, which is always a fun idea. All right, so I've got one more hole on this signature to attach. So to finish this off, just like all the other times, I'm going to link this underneath. But since there's no new hole to go into, I'm gonna go back through the previous one. It's important to try not to pierce the thread while you do this. It'll just help it not wear and wear on that so it stays strong. And we're also gonna go back through the signature and pull it tight. This time, even though we're going back through the same hole, since it's looped, it's got something secure to hold it to, so you're not gonna accidentally pull it through. All right, from this point, I like to knot things by taking this thread, going under that first loop, and then before I pull it tight, I'm gonna take this loop and go back through it. And then I'm gonna pull it down towards this so that my knot ends up right on that hole. You can do that twice and call it good, but so I don't have an extra long weird tail, I like to do it again, but this time I'm gonna loop around so my thread goes through that hole. I'm gonna pull it up so it's kind of twisted together right now, and then I'm gonna repeat. I'm gonna put my needle underneath, making sure to catch the thread right here, and the thread I'm working with, I'm gonna pull that, but before I pull it tight, I'm gonna loop my needle through that hole and then pull it tight up this way. Now there's a knot at this hole and this hole, which just gives it another layer of protection so that if something happens to the wear and tear of your book and these knots come undone, it is a lot less likely to all the way unravel. At this point, I'm going to trim that. Again, to help it not unravel, I like to leave a little tail. And if you're using a good wax thread, you can just kind of push that down into itself so you don't have it hanging out. Before we're all the way finished, we're gonna come do the same thing on the signature we started with. You don't have to thread your needle. I find it's helpful though because of how small that space is. So once again, I'm going to make a loop, needle through the loop, pull it snug, loop underneath, loop again. I already went through that hole as I pulled it out, pull it snug. So you've got 2 knots and trim. And that will give you a finished book. One thing you'll notice with leather, this one is a faux leather, but with genuine leather too, because it's not used to sitting in a closed position, it'll flop open at first. I just like to give my spine there a good little bend, help it learn where it needs to stay. But the more you like keep the book flat, put something hard on it, and it's eventually, like this one, it will just stay where it should. This is especially true if you've got a little bit thicker leather. It might take it a little bit to stay, but stay it will. And there is our finished product.